I'll never forget this day.
What's up, troops? It's me, TheTacticalBrit, and I'm back after a 2-week hiatus of not touching anything involving YouTube. But today's a really good day, actually, to return and make a new video because lots of new information has been released on Battlefield 1. Now, today we're going to be looking at some of the new weapons, some of the new vehicles, and mostly discussing the open beta, which is coming, in my opinion, very soon. So first of all, let's discuss open beta. Now, the alpha to Battlefield 1 I felt was very successful, ran very smoothly, there were some issues here and there, but ultimately a good success in the first step to what should be a good and smooth release. And now we have the open beta coming. So the first big question is what's going to be in the open beta. Now, obviously we're going to see feasibly what was in the alpha, the content that was already there, alongside some new introductions. I imagine they're going to be trialing their new mode that they've recently added, Operations. I can see that being thrown into the mix just for testing purposes to make sure it's functioning properly. So I can picture seeing Conquest, Domination and Operations being the 3 game modes potentially that are going to be in the open beta. Alongside that, quite obviously, we're going to have St. Quentin's Scar, but we're going to have a slightly different version because there's going to be different vehicles on it, and in one of the most recent Battlefield 1 videos, there's actually instances of armoured cars being showcased on the map which we hadn't seen before. So those are going to be there, and that's going to be quite interesting to see too. And obviously we're also going to have some new maps. Now, one of them that you may remember from the trailer is a desert map, and it features Arab warriors on horses chasing down a train that's running. And this has all been very much mentioned in my video on the Lawrence of Arabia previously. This was a train line running through the Ottoman Empire that supported them during World War I. And this map looks like it's going to be featuring 100% in the open beta as well. So at the bare minimum, we've got 2 maps and potentially 3 modes. Now, the next big question is, when is the open beta arriving? Now, there's been a lot of questions about this, and lots of people have been like, oh, it's going to be here, it's going to be there. But in all honesty, it just makes the most logical sense for it to happen after Gamescom or during Gamescom. Now, Battlefield is hosting a brand new live stream there called Battlefield Squads. It's going to feature lots of players playing the video game. Unfortunately, I'm not there. Wish I could be. But it's going to involve lots of people playing it in a live stream and lots of new trailers. And it's going to be a big marketing event for them because it's that one, the last big sort of marketing event pre-actual release in October. And it makes sense to me if they announce there and then that the Battlefield 1 open beta is coming, I don't know, maybe a few days after Gamescom, or even they might do that thing that they sometimes do at conventions where they're like, and you can play the open beta now, and then everybody just loses their shit and all the servers crash. So something along the lines of that I imagine is going to happen, so expect it within the next sort of 1 to 3 weeks at best, in my personal opinion. And it's going to be a good beta. I feel like it's going to be one that's going to be very focused on the technical aspects of Battlefield 1. I really want to see lots of things improved on the console side of things, such as server tick rate. I also want to see things improved in terms of balancing on both platforms. So it's going to be really interesting to see how things like that work in the new open beta and what has changed since the feedback that we provided since the alpha. And I can imagine it's going to be some positive results. It's going to sound really good, in my opinion, because, you know, the alpha jump to the beta jump is always a big one, and there's going to be some noticeable differences, in my opinion, that we're going to see. So, you know, it's a good thing to look forward to within the next 2 to 3 weeks. So, what in terms of content can we anticipate to see in the open beta beyond just obviously maps and modes? What kind of vehicles, what kind of weapons have been showcased, and what's going to be in there? Now, there's no guarantee that this new content is going to be in the open beta, but there has been some information released on new vehicles and new weapons that are coming to Battlefield 1. And it looks really good, and I'm going to delve into some minor details that were shown off in these trailers, alongside some of the actual things that we've seen featured. So let's jump right in. So, first and foremost, in the new vehicles trailer, we've seen the first instances of a motorbike in Battlefield 1, which is going to be really awesome. And this is actually on St. Quentin's Scar as well, the map that's being showcased. So it's very feasible that motorbikes have been added to the map itself. Now, I'm interested to see how they're going to work in Battlefield 1, because in previous Battlefield titles, it was like, how can I describe it? It was like throwing an ice cube down a bar of soap. It was just really weird. So it's going to be interesting to see how they handle on that front. It looks like they're going to be seating 2 people, so lots of potential for gunfire engagements on motorbikes, which sounds really cool to me. Next up, we have a non-armoured car. Now, we do have the armoured car, which has its own little gun at the top of it, but this one's more open and actually has viewing space outside as opposed to having to be confined into a gun tower. So that's going to be another nice addition, as well as a transport vehicle in the game. So this trailer heavily focused on tanks, and it was talking about how tanks were terrifying and big and physical, and it looks like the developers have made evidently clear that tanks are here to stay as a very brutal and feared thing. Now, you guys may remember there was lots of discussion on YouTube about the role of tanks, how threatening they should be, how powerful they should be, and the general response by the looks of things in this gameplay series video is that the devs have basically said, we're going with powerful tanks. So that might not be to the taste of some people, but I personally prefer it. Now, alongside this and what the developers have said, we've seen some new paint for some of the tanks. Now, in previous iterations on the alpha, there was only a green kind of paint set up for the tank, and lots of people have been wondering how camos and things like that are going to work on Battlefield 1, and by the looks of things, they're not going to be too extravagant, but they're going to allow you to change up the visualization of your vehicle or your weapons ever so slightly. So in this example, the German tank has a very basic and very clean white paint job, which looks really good in my opinion. The trailer then goes on to discuss aeroplanes and how they were involved in World War I, and talking about the fact that the introduction of the aeroplane was massive and there was so much focus on them during this era. Now, one of the first things that I noticed during the trailer was that as one of the plane darts by, there's a very clear checkered paint job on it, which wasn't really visually available in the alpha, and that looks like an instance of a paint job being available on one of the planes, and it looks really sort of strange, but I kind of like it. It's checkered, it looks cool, and I can imagine that having really sort of crazy and out of this sort of style paint jobs on planes is going to be something that might happen, because as you know, in World War I and in World War II, lots of people like to customize their planes to make them look more crazy and more menacing. Now, next we have a yellow checkered plane, which is an attack plane, but what's interesting to note is not the paint job, but the fact that it's firing rocket rounds as opposed to anything else. Now, so far, the attack planes only have had a sort of bullet-style cannon and bombs that they can drop, but this one, by the looks of things, is using some kind of rocket pod. Now, off to the right of that, we also have a bomber, and this is a bomber that we haven't seen before. It's got a twin-tail back design and has a slightly shorter wingspan than some of the other bombers that we've seen thus far. So that's going to be another interesting addition as well. And what I've been quite interested to see is how many different iterations of these vehicles that we're going to see. And it's very clear from this, and also from the next section, where he skips through the different kinds of planes and loadouts that they'll be using, that we're actually going to be able to chop and change a lot with these vehicles, and one bomber might have 4 different versions, or one plane might have 3 or 4 different versions as well. So it's going to be really good to see, and by the looks of things, we're going to have lots of variations up in the sky. It's also worth mentioning that horses are a thing. During the most recent vehicle trailer, there was actually a horse icon spotted during the trailer where it was showcasing the new spawn screen, and you can actually spawn in as a horse on San Quentin's Scar, or at least mounting a horse. You don't want to spawn in as a horse, that would probably go treacherously bad, but you know what I mean. It's quite interesting to see that horses will most likely be in the open beta, and it's something that's very much going to be in the game at a full force, quite similarly to vehicles. So what about weapons? Now, weapons is something that's also been shown off in a most recent trailer, and they discussed mostly about melee and how things were going to be medieval and brutal in terms of that respect, but there's also been some other weapons that have been mentioned or shown off. First of all, we have the MG15 low weight. Now, what's quite interesting about this is, along the side of getting an MG15, we also have something called low weight, and this appears to be a variation of the weapon, much like the fact that there are different variations of the same gun, that appears to be lighter but will likely have some setbacks such as ammo count or the amount of bullets it can hold in a magazine. So that's kind of filling the void of the assault rifle, I feel. It's trying to kind of like cover that up with something. Next up, we have the fact that there is a suppressor. There appears to be a suppressed version of the MG15 as noted in the trailer, and I imagine that might in itself be a version of the gun itself. Next up, we have mortar shells. Now, mortars were supposedly going to feature in the game as potential emplacements around the map, but it looks like they may also feature as a form of gadget or equipment as well. And during the trailer, we saw somebody fire a mortar shell and take out an enemy, so it'll be interesting to see how they are done. Next up is the Automatic 5LI, or Light Infantry, and this looks like a Saiga 12K, effectively. I can't really describe it in any other way, because it basically is a Saiga 12K, but World War I style. So, I'm not too sure how I feel about that. Not a big fan of the Saiga 12K, but, you know, we'll see how that goes. You gotta have a shotgun here and there eventually, right? And then finally we have the Automatico M191ALI. Yes, that's a mouthful, but it's a gun featuring in the game as well. And it also looked like we had a glimpse of a bolt-action rifle, which remotely looked like a Lee Enfield rifle. So we've got that going for us too. So other than that, there's not really much to mention. One of the developers actually tweeted that they had played the open beta, which kind of led me to the conclusion that we're going to see this thing at Gamescom, either just before, just after, or during. But other than that, it's onwards and upwards for Battlefield 1, and effectively from now on to October, the train of hype and the train of information is really quite real, and we'll get to see how things start to come together a bit more piece by piece, especially with this open beta. So guys, that's about it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed what you've seen, all the new information, and I hope you guys have had fun playing Battlefield and watching videos that I've made and things like that. And it looks like it's really starting to kick off now on YouTube, so expect to see lots of content here, lots of news, lots of information, and analysis as well, and also some pretty good gameplay, because I felt like, no offense to a lot of people, but that was lacking on YouTube. Everybody was just kind of like throwing out whatever they had, but I've been trying to make sure that my gameplay isn't shit. So with a bit of luck, hopefully you guys have been liking that too. So that's about it for today's video, fellas. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon in another video.